A friend of mine who's a teacher, and she's been teaching up in Madras for the whole year. She said she has never seen her students' faces, and she would not recognize most of them if she passed them on the street.
That's true.
Yeah.
My son-in-law is a teacher, and he ran into a group of his students at a coffee shop.
Didn't know.
And he didn't know who they were at first, except one of them said his name or something, and he went up and talked to them, and they didn't know who he was either.
Yeah.
I never have that problem. All I have to do is start talking
And they know
people
you.
say, oh, you're Melanie. Yeah.
I've been working on a project for 2 years, a lot of meetings on Zoom, and at the NAACP meeting dinner, one of the people was there, and we looked at each other, and I'm like, you're tall, you're tall. You're tall.
That's funny.
I looked at him and was like, oh.
And you have a
You have legs.
We had,
Yes, you have legs.
we hired our owners reps. They were all about
Yeah.
6'2" or taller,
Wow.
and we'd been meeting for 2 months online.
There was actually an article in the New York Times about pregnant women in work and how much they
Right.
liked it
Oh,
on Zoom
yeah.
because people weren't constantly touching their bellies and asking them,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
They
like
never
that.
asked, they just.
Well, it's like
Yeah.
when they film TV shows and
yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could film past pregnancy.
yeah. It's better to meet in person, believe me. Yeah. All right, are we ready to start?
Yeah, I'll call the meeting. Are you ready, Todd?
I am just, oh,
Okay.
yes, I am.
Okay, we're recording.
Yes.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order and welcome everybody to our work session. And this is the public comments section of our meeting. Does anybody have public comments? Hearing none, I'll turn it over to Margaret. How's
Okay.
that for a brief?
Thank you. Okay, so we have 2 hours, and this is the first of quarterly meetings that have been established in order to give yourselves some time to really look at big picture issues. And because your agendas are so packed, sometimes it's hard to really step back and have time to have thoughtful conversation about some of the things that are coming down the pike, and thinking about how you all govern and your governance policies is, I was looking to see if I have the exact words, and I'm sure you have them memorized, Ray, but it's like with a preoccupation for outward and future orientation. And so this is the first session really to think about a few issues. And then when we finish right before noon, we can talk about what are some other things that you would like to talk about. So this is not meant to be a one-off, but quarterly as you go through the building project and other things come your way. So does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so the focus today is we're going to look at East Bend, and again, it's really kind of looking at a 5 to 10 year perspective.
Are you still getting that live transcript?
Uh-oh.
Are you
I'm
still
getting the closed caption.
Are you still getting it? Okay, good. I tried to shut it down on this, but not yours.
I can't, why can't you get rid of my screen?
I don't know
Pause.
why it is focused on you, but don't worry.
I mean, you think Margot should be on the screen.
Well,
No, don't.
no,
What everybody else is seeing.
uh-oh.
Okay.
Hey.
So again, there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now in terms of your current building.
Sorry.
What? No? Okay,
Sorry.
take a
Sorry,
breath.
today.
That's okay.
That was-
Pause.
Okay. Now you should be getting it.
Okay,
Yes, I am.
Okay, I just.
Your words are up there.
okay.
Okay.
So this is really a big picture discussion about East Bend. And as you have that discussion, you actually don't know the impact of your current projects on what will evolve with East Bend. So there's a lot of unknowns. So really it's kind of, you're trying to have a 5 to 10 year perspective. And yet there's some decisions that as a board you need to make now in terms of what you invest in East Bend. So we're kind of having that outward, forward, future discussion in the context of needing to make some current decisions about what you invest in East Bend. Is that a fair summary? So what I thought we would do, what?
In order to do that,
Yeah,
I'm thinking since we have members on the board who weren't here at
Yeah.
the discussion about East Bend,
uh-huh,
we should have some of this or information on how we got to where we are with East Bend, why we had it in the first place.
why do you have East Bend, you mean?
Right.
Okay, so we can talk about a little historical perspective, but then where we are in terms of what we know right now, in terms of what the architects are telling you, and what you don't know in terms of the impact of where you're going with other building projects and the impact they may have. And then what do those scenarios look like and pros and cons, and then hopefully kind of as a board, thinking about those and making a decision about what you think is best. So we could spend a few minutes just kind of, because East Bend was part of the package, I guess, what do we know currently about East Bend? And like, what do you want to say about that? Just a little bit of the history. Did you have something you wanted to add on that?
Oh, yeah, I think probably Ann Malcolm and I guess Todd too.
Yep.
Are really the only ones who really know the history.
I was
here. You were here all the time.
Yeah.
You didn't have to
You're all
cycle.
done. Yeah. We've all
Well,
been here.
Yeah,
I will let you leave.
Say what happened was this building is built for a community of 35,000 people. And around 2008, 9, 10, it was obvious that it was serving to this maximum capacity. And we needed to relieve pressure on it. And that's where we looked for the land at East Bend. And we decided to rent because we did not have the funding to build a new building.
And what year was that?
We opened it in 2011.
2011?
Well, actually,
Yeah.
back to 2008, when I looked it up, I went, holy mackerel. We went all the way back in October of 2008. The board, by consensus, actually what was happening is interesting. We were getting quarterly updates on community development. At that time, we were getting things like segments, lifestyles in different parts of the community, not just Bend as a whole. We're looking at East Bend, South Bend, North Bend, looking at Sun River, looking at the outsides of Sun River, the Times. We looked at both. It wasn't the city then, but the center core and then the outside. So we actually were getting very detailed information on what was going on and how the communities were growing and what were the characteristics of the people in the different parts of the community. It's not homogeneous even in there. So based on that, I think it was Kevin Barkley used to come back and tell us, you remember Kevin, give us the reports and say, here's what the segments look like within your community. And what he came back with, and we found was, yeah, there's a tremendous load on downtown Bend Library. But there's also a tremendous load of library users centered around the forum.
Yes.
And that came back and said, ooh, forums were clusters on the east side. Okay. So that was back in 2008. And then he said, and the board said, well, we're growing. No big surprise. Bend is growing. We didn't think the Shoots was growing as much. Bend is definitely growing. So he said, we have to do something to address the growth and our ability to serve. Same thing we're facing now. Our guess was it's going to grow to the east. You look at land, it's going to grow east, but we weren't sure. Because we had no control over what city council.
If I may step in, we actually used a company that kind of mapped out where our usage was. And it showed that there was a strong number of people, basically right, like you said, right around the forum where we knew we had ready-made users sitting right there.
Right.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
it's-
so-
Just to add to what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was actually an outside service.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the board at that time, and Ann was on the board, we said, we can't construct a new building. We could do it. Right, we go out for a bond and build an East Bend library. But what if then the city council decides to grow to the north? Or they decide to go in, and we're sitting out there with this multi-million-dollar building. Wow. So we said, let's rent someplace in East Bend. And I think Ann was actually on the committee subcommittee that went to look for spaces.
So that was 2011.
That was back in
No, it was, yeah, it
2009.
was
Nine.
here.
Yeah, but what were you gonna add?
Yeah, no, we looked for land,
Mhm.
and we were actually talking, we walked some land, we were in conversations with people about land, and we looked for available spaces and what it would cost to rent. And the decision was made to pursue the rental
Right.
route as a test case. And that's how.
That's how-
That decision,
Yeah.
because we knew, in addition to East Bend, the company that was doing the work for us also identified, they were basically identifying other areas as well.
Mhm.
And it was basically a geographic distribution thing of here's where the population pockets are, here's where the growth is occurring, and then here's where your only Bend library is.
Yeah, they also looked at our users.
Mhm.
So it wasn't just population, who was actually using the library, which is most concerned to us. Because that was what's overloading downtown. So those things, we said, let's hedge our bets. If we rent, we can always pull out. And so the two things we looked at as criteria to say, are we correct here is, one, are people going to use East Bend?
Mhm.
So what's going to be the usage there? And two, is it going to relieve the pressure on downtown?
Mhm.
So we looked at those two things, and let's get the data on it. Well, it took several years and finally getting data back. If we look at our attendance per square foot and all that. Yeah, East Bend actually turns out to be the highest usage per square foot of all our libraries.
So,
And downtown, less demand on it. So it did two things, but now the question became, do we want to go forward and purchase the property? And somewhere we didn't get to discuss that.
Okay.
I think that got lost. But the history of it is,
No, that didn't get lost, Ray.
yeah, let's,
we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
well, okay, so that's kind of the history and the purpose.
Yeah, so the real demand is, and always has been. in
Yeah.
East Bend. And now that the city is actually developing, what, the Sun, the Elbow, Country Club Lane, the Stevens Road track.
Okay.
There's gonna be over, somewhere between 4,000 to 7,000 homes coming in there.
Okay.
In the next 2 or 3 years.
Let me hear what Ann would like to say about that.
I don't think East Bend ever got ignored or lost. I think when the board originally discussed this facilities plan, we discussed building the central library in East Bend because that made sense. We were already over there. We knew that there was demand. So we looked for property in East Bend. We also looked for property in South Bend. We looked at property in North Bend. We did not look for property in West Bend because we already had this library and we wanted to maximize use of our existing facilities. So that was the board's original intent. And that was the original, as Ray always points out, that was the original recommendation of the facilities planner, that we maintain, that we limit the number of branches to 6. When we looked for property, there was no suitable property available in East Bend. And so we made that decision that, that what we were trying to do was not going to be viable. If there was not a suitable piece of property in East Bend to locate a branch. And so the board said, we are not willing to abandon services in East Bend. Our East Bend services are popular. That segment, that part of town needs a branch. We're not going to abandon East Bend. But let's look for land for this central facility, because that was the whole centerpiece of this facilities plan. So that's what we did. But there was never any discussion of pulling services from East Bend. And the only reason we didn't locate on the east side was because there was not available property that fit our needs.
Yeah, I have
So
a
hold on,
question.
I got two people, 1, 2.
When you were looking at that, how far out were you willing to go to call that East Bend? Because East Bend, good Lord, you could go way out there to find property, but did
There
you
was-
want to
well,
go
There
way
was
out?
one piece of property that was way out there.
Yeah,
I
Stevens
mean,
Road.
that we drove and drove, and it
Mhm.
wasn't a viable piece of property because it didn't have any infrastructure. Wasn't there one way out
Yeah,
there?
Stevens Road on
Yes.
27th, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was
And-
300 acres.
And it
wasn't for sale.
And it
It wasn't for sale.
But other than that, it
That's
was
right, it
perfect.
wasn't for sale.
Okay, so wait, I want to make sure, Cynthia, yeah.
Yeah, so I was on the board at that time,
Mhm.
and I had just come on the board. And I remember it was, let me turn this off.
Okay.
It was very important that we come up with an idea that would allow us to continue with East Bend.
Mhm.
And I know that in looking at everything, that was important to me. I remember Martha and I having a conversation about how important it was to look at East Bend. And so that was really important. But when there was nothing there for us to purchase, I mean, we had to move on.
So
We
it's,
need to have the
yeah.
land to build.
So it's important to remember the facts of what happened here. And I'll get you a sec, but now where I'm going to transition us is to, so here we are. And you have a decision before you. So go ahead, Ray.
Let me point out
Mhm.
that what the architectural consultant came back to us with was a huge central library. So based on that, that drove the size of the land that we went to buy. It wasn't that land was not available on the east side. It wasn't available for 100 to 120,000 square foot library. Well, our original plan,
Okay.
the original plan for the board had always been, we'll build something on the east side, maybe the size of downtown, maybe a little bit bigger. We put over there.
Mhm.
That didn't get discussed.
No, that was never part of the original plan. We asked facilities consultants to come up with the best way to deliver library services for the money. And in this expansive public input that we got, we identified what services do the people of Deschutes County want their libraries to provide. And the building was sized based on needs identified by staff, needs identified by the public, and that's what drove the building size.
Mhm.
It wasn't that they just picked that size out of the hat. They said, in order to accommodate what you're trying to do and prepare for the future, this is the size of building you will need to do that.
Exactly.
It wasn't just
Okay.
like an arbitrary.
Okay,
Exactly,
size.
but they
hold on a
said it
minute,
was-
Cynthia, who's next?
I recall
Yeah.
too, and one of the big things, we realized we needed a central library that was big enough to support all the branches and to support any future branches.
Mhm.
And so that was the discussion that I remember, was that we needed something large enough to be supportive to all the other places and to be supportive of this whole county.
Mhm.
It's not just Bend, you guys.
Mhm. Okay.
There are other communities.
So, I mean, it's useful to go back and to get the facts right of the years that you spent analyzing these things. But I'm gonna say, but we can't relitigate what happened. You are here now and you have a board, you have a fiduciary responsibility to think about. You've made decisions, what you want to do now with East Bend in terms of investing in it. So go ahead, and then I'm going to ask, is there anything else for context that people want to just talk about? Because some of you were here, some of you weren't, but that doesn't matter. The decisions were made as a board, so. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, there's plenty of property on the east side now.
Mhm.
We see that. Right, Stevens Creek has already been annexed into the city. The developers are putting all the infrastructure, paid to SDC. On the track that we have in Opie Riley, we're gonna pay for the SDCs and all the charges. Okay. So that's something different. When we looked at, the architects came back with their recommendation for a central library to serve all of the county. This is the basic problem that's coming up in the community now. People are telling us, I'm never gonna use this library. It's really big, it's really nice, but I'm never gonna use it. You're gonna spend all my money, 60% of the money on this facility.
Ray, we've already decided.
Yeah.
You've already,
Okay.
the board has already
Well,
decided.
let me finish, right?
Yeah.
So when we
Well,
say-
I'm gonna just stop for a minute. Because I'm uncomfortable with hearing people say, people are saying, I'm hearing, that, to me, that's just inappropriate for a board member, okay? It's just, be perfectly honest, I've been working with this district for more than 20 years. And the way you get information and use it, you have structured ways that you as a whole board get that information. You may be looking at input and other things, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But to start bringing out, I've talked to people, they think this, that's not how a board governs. A board governs together, looking at information together, and it can only hurt overall the district to have different members talking to different people in that way, and you're not a whole anymore. And you have made decisions, and some people are comfortable with those decisions, and some people are not comfortable. But one of your key things is speaking with one voice. So, you know, I feel the pain for, you know, we could have done this, we could have done that. I've spoken to people who think this, but here you are as a board as a whole, and how you listen to people, how you take in information is really important. And so that's just my, you know, my heart, from my heart to you all about how this board should govern as a group for the betterment of this community. You have made decisions. Decisions do not have to be unanimous, but once the board has spoken, decisions have been made, bonds have been passed, and now you have a decision before you about East Bend. And that's your job. Your job as a board is to make that decision. Like, what do we do? Do we pour money into it? Do we just do a little upgrading? And that's what we're here to talk about today. So it would be, we could go back and do history and we should have done this, we should have done that, but here we are. And so that's, you know, I've been with you guys a long time, and I have to be really honest that it concerns me that people are, you know, like, I've heard this, I've heard that. And yes, we don't know what people think, all people think. We're not taking a poll, but there was a vote.
That
So
was the ultimate.
that was the ultimate poll. And here we are. So what's the next step? What is your best thinking about East Bend? So with all due respect, I'd ask us to transition to talking about what you do about this in the short term. And then we can look at other questions that you have going forward. But to me, it's just like a slippery slope that won't help you govern as a group. Okay, sorry. But
One last thing,
yes,
we talk about the bond election as though we're election for the central library. It's not, it's our election for a bond, period.
mhm,
It was a package deal.
mhm.
We did, so we've never asked have we ever asked the question of the public in an election, are you for or against, are you for community libraries or are you against community libraries? Are you for the central library or against it?
That's true.
Well, we did have an election.
We,
What
Was the,
But the bond was that, but go ahead, Ann.
yeah, no, that was
Yeah.
the bond. Our job as a board, we did not take the approach of, we want $195 million and we'll come up with a plan. Our approach was, here is, after 6 years of work, here's our best plan that we can put forward, and this is what we propose to do, and this is where we propose to put it.
Mhm.
And we would like you to approve bonds to accomplish this project. And in doing that, they voted for a central library. And no one goes out for a vote on location of facilities, because, I mean, it's like saying, well, we're thinking about buying some land, and would you guys like to vote where you'd like to see it? And then the land quadruples in value.
Yeah.
So that's why we have executive sessions around land purchases.
Correct.
Because that's up to us as a board to use our best judgment on what's the best location. That is not the job of the public.
And Cynthia had her hand up, and you also had an extensive public input process to lead to what was finally designed. I mean, I was at those things, so go ahead.
I guess my thinking,
Yeah.
and correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, my understanding of being on a board
Mhm.
is it's our responsibility to get as much information as we can. Yes, get public input
Mhm.
as much as we
Yeah.
can. And then it's up to us to make the decision.
Correct.
Okay, well, the general community, number one, they don't take the time to read our minutes or like listen to what we're discussing. They elected us to make a decision. So if they don't like the decisions we've made, then if I run again, they toss me out.
Mhm.
This idea of us trying to go back and getting all this
Mhm.
information from the community who does not understand exactly all the steps we've gone through, that doesn't make any sense to me.
You're exactly right.
So, but here we are, okay, and, okay, we haven't heard from Ann. Go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, and I agree with Cynthia. Our
Yeah.
job is to gather information. And we did just recently in November, ask the community again
Mhm.
what they wanted from our libraries. And so we have over about 400 responses from our community, and it did come back on all sites. And speaking specifically to East Bend, we got a tremendous response back saying, we love this library and we want it to be a permanent, our own library. So we are continuing to gather
Sure.
information, and I think as a
You
board,
bet.
we need to
That's-
respect our constituents' input. So
So,
we're continuing to gather
Sure.
that information.
Right.
absolutely, because you are really but it's both things. You're
Yeah.
constantly gathering and using that to make decisions. You're also listening to professionals to help you make decisions. And then it all comes together and you go, what's our best thinking? And you may be in agreement, you may be not. But once you make a decision, then you speak with one voice. So that's kind of how you all govern. You're both right? They're not mutually exclusive. Thanks.
The board did not request this information. The architects
Yeah.
did. I mean, it's been valuable information to read and listen to, but it was what the architects were asking because they wanted to know what the community wanted to see in their libraries. So I think that's an important difference.
It's important to know who's asking the information and who it's meant for and how it's going to be used. So there's lots of ways that information is asked for in this district. It's, as a board, you ask yourselves, what information do we need? And that really comes from your policies. That comes from how you monitor your results and other parts of your policy. And if you say, we need this information to know if we're achieving our results policies or executive limitations, then as a board as a whole, you take that information. Some of this, I'm sure people are asking for all kinds of information. So the discipline of the board working together and gathering information is also very important, because otherwise it takes away from the wholeness of your board being able to operate together in a cohesive manner. So we're kind of already talking about what I wanted to talk about at the end, which was the role of the board in this work. But I think it's useful to kind of remind, Anne, you're new to the policy governments and all, and it's kind of useful to talk about it in the context of real world questions that you're having right now, like, what do we do about East Bend? So with your permission, can we move to, I'm looking at the time, East Bend? What do we know? What are some of the questions? What are the scenarios essentially for short term? Because you don't know long term what's going to be, and then what action do you want to take about that? So are you gonna talk? Okay. What? Oh, sorry.
Shouldn't we be looking at what we want long term, to be able to say how we achieve that?
I think starting short term is good, because I'd like to know, well, where are we with East Bend? How busy is it? How long do we have?
Yeah.
Yes, the present
before we
statistics and
have
all.
to?
Right.
Let's talk about what we know about East
Is that what
Bend,
you meant?
and then we'll talk about what some of the options are in terms of decisions and why it's important to make a decision. Regardless of long-term of East Bend, you have a question before you of,
Right, we have a decision.
you have a
to make.
decision to make. So it could be after your other buildings are built, that it impacts how East Bend is used, who knows? But, so you may end up doing something else with East Bend, but short term, the question is, do you do some minor upgrades or do you do some major investment into the rental building? So that's really the question before you, and is what do you need to know to do that, all right? Ready, everybody ready? Okay.
Yes, so to point out, when we went into the bond, the original thinking that was we would be doing some minor upgrades to East Bend. With the realization that one, it's a rental facility, and also we did not know the full impact of the new central library on East Bend. Would we continue to have the same amount of usage? Would it go down? That's kind of one of the nice things about the rental property is we have the ability to adjust. I think what happened early on in discussions with the board and kind of getting some input from early meetings with Miller Hole is they were getting the impression that the board wanted to go way beyond what we'd originally started. So they actually have come back and said, here, we can like move everything. We can move the entire meeting staff area over here. We can rearrange how the public uses this area. And as you'll see in the memo from Greg, that full option is the option A with a subtotal of $2.3 million to do that. And I'll point out that they have not started design on this building yet. This is a concept. But they are about to launch into schematic designs. And so this is the point where the board does need to weigh in and say, here's what we want or don't want before you start designing. Because that would be obviously a big price tag. The second option B is I had Greg look at it and say, what if we did a minimal level of work to upgrade this, especially factoring in, kind of keeping things the same, but factoring in upgrades that we would learn from all of our other design projects where we could upgrade technology and possibly upgrade some furnishings. And so that's where you get the $852,000 price tag. And so that's kind of, and then you probably have an extreme, which would be you do 0, which I wouldn't recommend because
Okay.
we
We told the voters that we would upgrade it as appropriate.
Yes, yes,
And
and it will need some,
But,
it will need some, well,
Yeah.
especially for technology, we want to upgrade that to the new standard.
well, yeah, is anybody interested in looking at 0 at this point?
No,
No.
well, I just.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we have two options, but,
Well, yeah, and basically, and you can have anything in between in there, because it depends on how much the board wants to invest in this facility at this time. All the other projects, which you'll be looking at as we go along, they were pretty well laid out in the bond. They would be remodeling the plant, we'd remodel Sisters, we'd remodel Sun River, and we built a new building in Redmond. And the new central library. So that's kind of where we are there. I've got the memo from Greg that kind of gives you some outlines of the costs, and that kind of opens it up for you as far as where you would like to go.
so what I thought we could do you want a little bit to reread this and take a minute to read through this? Or are you all memorized as to,
Yeah.
there will be a test.
Yeah.
Take a minute or two, and then we'll go through the scenarios and kind of think it through.
Hey, Todd, what are AMH components?
Automated materials handling, so that's the.
Yeah.
the self checkout,
Good.
automated check.
Thank you.
Does E include AMH?
That's a great
Okay, so
question.
yeah, what questions do we have about this?
Because that's AMH and IT components were the examples that we were giving of what we did want to upgrade.
It would, we could probably do some AMH, but not to the extent that we're talking about with the.
With the size of East Bend, AMH would be very difficult to include, but we could do some different types of book drops and book returns that would kind of act in place of the AMH, similar to what we're putting in the Pine Sisters and Sun River. We would do an upgrade on all of our shoots, book drops, excuse me. I have to switch my language.
So you probably
So we
make,
could do it, yeah.
so you're making a decision maybe for like the next 3 to more 5 years about thinking about this facility. And then you're going to be learning what the impact's going to be of the other projects you have and listening to people. So what, do you want to just go through and sort of, it kind of is like your call of how much you want to invest in this facility right now. So we could kind of talk about them as a whole. We could take one, you know, what are the pros and cons of each one? Or what are your general thoughts about it?
I'm wondering how long we're going to keep these,
Okay, good question.
either leased. I mean, how long are we going to lease it for?
Mm-hmm.
And after that, what?
After that.
And are we going to wait on what the data shows us about usage? And then decide again?
Okay.
So it's almost the same thing we did back in 2008.
Mhm.
We're doing again 13 years later. It seems like an awful long.
So that's a question.
What about
Okay.
waiting?
Okay.
I guess my question is, yes, Todd, you said, you know, we're gonna be looking at, does the attendance or the use of East Bend drop once the central library is up? If it doesn't, then, you know, we would probably be looking at what can we do at East Bend? But now if we go, you know, that's a lot of money to invest in something that's a rental, but at the same time, if we look at the end of our 5-year lease, we need to move on. How do then we rearrange those dollars into looking at what we want to do for East Bend. So
Right.
it's kind of hard to weigh back and
Yes.
forth.
That's a really good summary, Anna.
Yeah.
Because your job, you're stewards of the public's
Right,
Right.
funds
right.
at the highest level. So you described the dilemma you have right now, like you did when you were deciding to go out for, what do you call it, selling the bond or something. It was like, we're stewards of the money.
Right.
So that's where you're at, but you're also elected to make decisions. So it's kind of like, yeah.
The other question that one other thing that could impact usage, is Costco moving.
Oh,
You know,
Okay.
like, that was one reason that location was so attractive, is like, well, people are going to Costco and they'll stop by on their way to Costco and all the stuff, the Safeway and all that down there.
Yeah.
You know, so when Costco moves, how's that gonna impact usage? And how's that gonna impact usage of the whole forum area?
mhm.
You know, like they'll still have the Safeway and probably Whole Foods, but what else, like, well, other
Yeah.
things go away.
Right.
As it turns out, on that, I've been talking to the managers at Costco here. They said it's not happening. The latest word is Freddie pulled out, Fred Myers pulled out, leaving Costco with the SDC charges. Costco management up in Washington said they own the property, they're not going to develop it now because they're not willing to go it alone. So tell they get another major tenant will be in with them. It's not happening for anyone in the near future, which makes all the managers, they're happy because they're happy.
So those are unknowns, but you're still back to
That's
like,
a no, they're
Yeah.
not going there for the next foreseeable future.
oh, yeah, I mean, we don't know the answers back. Well, maybe you've heard that, but it's not,
We probably want to verify that.
yeah, we want to verify.
That comes from the managers at the Costco.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but again, it's important to get verifiable information. So
So there,
as you make decisions as a board.
yeah, exactly. There are factors that can change over time.
Right,
Right.
right. So again, your board's responsibility is to, act on what you know and then your assumptions and, okay, so Anne, you really put it to the, you summarized it, yeah. But what are your thoughts?
Well, Todd, I have another question. What is the difference between the cost of A over what is budgeted now for East Bend? I'm sorry, I didn't bring my budget, so I'm just curious what the difference in cost then.
Of what is budgeted,
Not for B, but for what was kind of in the plan.
But we budgeted for sisters and for.
Yeah.
Put the check.
Because it wasn't 2.3 for East Bend, for
No,
the
it
original
wasn't.
budget. So I was just
no,
curious.
actually, the
Ballpark.
original budget, and I don't have the original budget in front of me. It was going back to pre-bond. They didn't factor anything in for East Bend.
Okay,
But then with the owners reps, they had a budget for East Bend.
Yes,
I did bring that. Shit.
and I'm sorry, I don't have the
Okay.
exact
Okay.
number, but it's gone
Okay.
up based on
Yeah.
these
You
changes.
can look
So,
at
so
Brady.
do you think it's someplace in between the 2.3 and the 800?
The original one?
Original?
Yeah.
It may have been, it really
Yeah.
kind of goes down to what you want there.
Yeah.
That's the real,
What do you want, how do you want to invest your dollars over the next? What do you want the experience to be for your patrons? Yeah, go ahead.
And looking at East Bend, and we don't know, I guess, at this point, how the central library will affect it. So if we project out, the central library will be built at this time. And then however long after that, we might want to start looking at it. So how many years do we think that will be?
Good question.
And then projecting that onto East Bend. So perhaps at that point, we need to start looking at land, or we need to start looking at land now just to invest in land. But we want to see what happens with Central and how that.
So you're asking kind of what's the timeline look like? What,
Yeah,
are we making a decision for the next 3 years, the next?
5 years.
5
'cause we
years,
have a 5
Because that's
year
probably gonna
lease.
impact your thinking about what you want to do. Okay.
And we do have a 5-year lease, correct?
Correct.
So the lease is up,
We just,
4 years?
2026,
We just signed it, so it'll be up in 26.
2026. Okay. Okay.
Don't quote me, but.
Okay.
25.
Can I point out that our ability to extend that lease is strong.
Okay.
That's,
Okay.
we're not under the threat of them trying to get rid of us.
Okay.
We're an anchor tenant that is,
But in 2026, do we think, well, yeah, I think we'll know what the effect of the
Question.
Central Library.
When the central library is due to open? 2024. Okay.
So that gives
So-
us 2 years to
Mhm.
figure out, is that affecting East Bend or not?
Okay.
and the other thing that could have an impact also is the alternative delivery systems that the central library will enable, that we are piloting
Yes.
right now. And it's like, if we do these pilots and they turn out to be successful,
Mhm.
then where do we go with those? You know, like if they're wildly successful and then we start putting them all over, what effect does that have on East Bend?
Right. Okay.
And so 2026 might give us that same potential to have looked at those pilot programs, or we should have.
We should have some
That's a
idea of like, do we want to expand that or?
and I would just say it would be soon, because really our 100% focus is on these buildings and the final project will be done in 2025 with downtown Bend.
Okay.
So you may have a lot of data for that.
So there's gonna be a lot of data leading in. So essentially what you're saying is you're making a 4-year decision that you're gonna really start thinking about in 3 years. Like, what have we learned and what is that telling us? Is that fair to say? You're making a
Yeah.
decision for a building, knowing you can extend. Cynthia.
Todd, is there a projected date to look for putting a kiosk somewhere? I know that was being tried out, but
Yeah, so we kind of held off on that because one, the building projects are consuming a lot of time, and then, so no, I don't have a projected date for that at this point.
I know that was something that we did to talk about this last spring, it seems to me. We talked.
We
about
did, it was in the budget.
possibility of- And if we were to put a kiosk in different places, it'd be interesting to see what kind of an impact that would have also on the various branches.
Yes, and the one challenge with the kiosks is they're basically permanent. So you can't pick them up and move them around, which is something we learned in the. But that's
I realize
definitely a
that
possibility,
kiosks
and a big piece of that kiosk, the success of kiosks is having that hub, that central hub that allows us to.
To
process
facilitate that.
And
Okay.
that's one of the challenges right now is we don't have that hub. So adding in those kiosks right now would put a big strain on our current system.
But the central hub will allow you to to expand the kiosk program.
Yeah, all to expand all our outreach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
How's the kiosk different from what we did in Sarah?
It would, we're looking at automated ones, whereas no human needs to be involved and you don't have to staff.
Do you think, and what would it do in terms of, patron usage?
I don't know. I don't
That's a
know.
question, we can have an automated kiosk, but it turns out to be just like Terravon. With nobody there.
Well,
Different. And people don't use it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Good point.
Like
The
the,
one I'd say is we wouldn't be putting it in Terrible. We'd be putting it somewhere with a high traffic
Right.
area.
Accessible and,
Like, for
So-
example,
The airport.
Birchwood Plaza in Bend or.
Yeah.
Could,
Yeah,
okay,
could,
Cynthia.
the East Bend, could we get data as to the number of people who just come in and check out a book, number of people who go to events at East Bend, the number of
sure, we have that
children who
already.
attend, do we have all those
Yeah, we
numbers?
have all that.
Yeah.
We have our COVID, pre-COVID numbers and then the current ones too.
Okay.
Could you give us some like headlines of that?
Well, I think having worked in East Bend, talked to staff in East Bend, and been in East Bend since its opening. East Bend is really kind of a pickup and drop off location. As far as materials go, and I could do some comparison figures. I don't have them at my disposal right now, but I could look at attendance numbers compared with first time checkouts and see how many people are just like popping in and how many are checking out. The other thing East Bend gets a lot of use is public PCs.
Public what?
The public computers.
Okay.
They tend to be anywhere from 60% full
Mhm.
at any given time. Now, public PC usage is going down quite a bit overall throughout the district. People have their own devices a lot of times. But that really is what East Bend has always been. It's always been, we check in more materials there than we ever check out. And which I always thought was interesting. It's the only library building that we have that does that. So we're constantly shuffling our books out of East Bend into our other locations. The average stay there is not long. It really is a pick up and drop off. I've had my holds here. It's quick because I'm going to the hospital. I'm from Pine. It's amazing how many people from South County go up there, but I'm going to the hospital, I'm going to Costco, then I'm going to the library. And so I've got my holds. I'm gonna come in, grab them, self-check, I'm out. The story times and programming, the meeting room, I think, is one of those meeting rooms that does have pretty good usage. It did pre-COVID. It was full a lot of the time. I haven't looked at that lately, but we've just reopened our meeting room, so we've, COVID kind of did a number on us as far as.
So get a number on the world.
Yeah, so we will start getting those numbers back again to see, how much of the meeting room is being used by the public. And then, I know before COVID, we were always jockeying with our adult programs, especially for space. Where can I do this? Where, it was East Bend. I have to get in there right away because the public did like to use those spaces. And the story times were very family oriented. They were family based and they were pretty well attended.
Can you say a little bit more what you meant about the shuffle and how you think the central?
So what
Sorry,
happened? So
I didn't mean
again,
to cut you off.
because customers returned books there more than they took them away, there was always a surplus of materials, more materials than shelving. And when East Bend was designed in 2010 and 2011, that's what we really had designed it for, was not so much browsing, but more, to get materials, but to pick up, drop off. So it's doing what it was meant to be doing. It's just doing it at a higher rate. And so what the staff are frequently doing is they are making sure that materials that get delivered on like a Tuesday, which is a high volume day at all of our libraries, but especially at East Bend, they will actually like check things in and send them to other places. So the courier stops at East Bend the beginning of the week a couple of times to take those crates out of the way, because they get pretty full up back there in their back room.
Okay.
So
So a lot of pickup.
a lot of pickup and
People-
drop off.
And so,
And when you have more check-in than you do have checkout, that means they might be getting their holds or they might be coming somewhere else to browse. But when they're maybe passing by doing errands or whatever, they're dropping stuff off at East Bend because it's quicker. They might be getting their books somewhere else, but there's more check-in at East Bend than there is checkout.
but there's a lot of pickups at East Bend too, right?
There is.
So they're ordering them in, going there to pick up.
Yeah,
So
but they're also getting them from other places and dropping them off
Yeah,
there.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Good. So
Yeah,
that's,
so what's their local library that they use? I mean, they're going there to drop it off. I don't think people.
It's
Well, we
hard
don't
to
know.
say.
We don't know if they're
Yeah.
going somewhere else to drop it off.
Yeah, it's
I
hard to
go there
say.
all the time to drop stuff off and I
But do you
don't,
pick them up there?
no, I pick them up
Based,
downtown.
based on the fact that we have
Cynthia.
more books, we just said it, more books are dropped off there than are checked out there,
Mhm.
is more people are using it for a drop-off space than are using it for pickup space.
Okay, Cynthia.
You said you don't have the numbers for the number of people who are staying to work on the computer pre-COVID?
No, I do have attendance numbers.
Okay.
And then when you compare them to like, say, first-time checkout usage, so I can look at the attendance and our self-checkouts.
Right,
And then the difference would be how many people are actually using the library
right,
for other reasons than checking out.
right,
I haven't done that number, but I can.
okay.
So that's kind of a profile of how the branch is operating now. And I think you could probably assume over the next 3 years, because that's the time frame we're kind of talking about, that we're hopefully returning to, not returning, because you can never return, but hopefully, no COVID life. That you could kind of anticipate that profile of drop off, public computers, short stays, meeting room usage and story time, kind of that
Mhm.
continuing as a profile.
Mhm.
And then knowing that you're going to start learning about the impact of your pilots, how your central processing is going to impact
Mhm.
that, possible use of kiosks, that's going to help you think past that.
Right.
So, okay.
So I think, you're right, it's doing what we wanted it to do.
Mhm.
So we don't know if we actually had more shelf space. When people stay there and browse, because we never intended to do that. We just intended it to take the pressure off the downtown. And that's what it did. So big unknown is if there were more shelf space, if there were more space available for browsing, for staying there. We don't know if
Don't know.
that would happen.
Yeah.
You know,
You don't-
Sort of indicates it might, but we don't.
It's
know.
hard to say.
Yeah, hard to say. So the things you know. Yeah.
If we moved, say we went out further east to eventually build a library, then there may be a potential to leave that one there because people like to be able to drop off. So is that a potential? That we
Well,
should
that's a
make?
facilities planning question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the,
Yeah,
That's-
I mean-
I will say with those kiosks, they are large. And they do require either us to beg, steal, or borrow space in an existing area that wants to partner with us, or to, again, lease a space that can be, you can walk into and get it.
So-
It wouldn't be as huge. It might just be like, remember, I think that's 5 bays, maybe 5 sections of that
Yeah.
parking area. So, or excuse me, that mall area, but it could be maybe just 1 bay might need to be leased. So there's a lot of stuff happening with those kiosks where they're kind of evolving, if you will, for indoor, outdoor usage. So we're watching that kind of settle down to see what it looks like. But those kiosks do have some requirements, as Todd said, they're super heavy. They're not meant to be moved around. You don't like pick them up and then move them somewhere.
Can't have one in my front yard.
No, well, you
Okay.
could. I think it might be.
Forever. Eugene might be a little far though. Okay.
And they do require some kind of heating and air conditioning, kind of
Okay.
like, you can't just leave.
Book
it out.
safety.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So anyway, that is an
Yeah.
interesting idea, Bunny.
Were you saying, Bunny, a kiosk or going further east to build a building?
I'm thinking about
Who knows?
looking at the future.
Uh-huh.
So do we need another library out further east and have a kiosk in the future? Or have we learned that drop off is good enough?
That's the
So
question.
But we don't know.
You don't
until
know.
we Build this building.
Right, so what I would like to say is for the last half hour, you've been having a really high level board discussion. That this is board thinking about what do we know, what we don't know. And you'll continue to have those discussions as you learn how the impact of the new buildings is and all the rest of that. So I'm kind of wondering if it would be useful, because kind of you have a profile of, you know what the options are, and there could be in between, and you know what the old profile was pre-COVID. Sort of what your general principles are as a board about what you'd like to think about for, like, I'm thinking, I'm just throwing this out, I'm not suggesting this, but it's like, at the minimum, we want people to have at least what they had before, you know, we want the building to serve, you know what I'm getting at? It's like, what is your key principle that you want over the next 3 years? You know, like, we want them to have more. We want to maintain what was there before. We want to make sure that the technology is effective. What are your principles as a group that would help you make this decision?
Well, that's a really important point.
Mhm. Thank you, Ray.
Because, well, no,
Okay.
it's way back, I mean, almost the very first. We saw it. Pressing on us. There was a big emphasis then on how big should libraries be? How do you determine what you want to have and how big should the library be? And ALA and GLA were coming out saying, stop, this back in the 70s before me. They're saying, do not use that metric anymore of square foot per 1,000 people. Look and see what you want to accomplish. What they were saying, what are your results policy and how do you, and then decide the priorities on those, and that determines the size and construction of your buildings. And I thought, I came back from those meetings going like, we're light years ahead of us. We're already doing that from the very beginning of this system. What do we want to provide? What's our results policy?
Yeah.
Now, what size buildings and what do we have to have?
Yeah, and thank you for referencing your results policies, because those results policies apply to the entire county.
Right.
And you represent the whole county,
Mhm.
even though you're elected in your different places, you represent the people of Deschutes County. So what
Well,
is
and
your,
that's essentially
Yeah.
what Ray just said is
Yeah.
is how we size that central library, right?
Mhm.
We looked for comments, we said, what's important to people? And based on what the needs were, how big does the building need to be?
Mhm.
Because I certainly didn't want to build, a bigger building than we needed, for sure, because at the time, we were gonna go out for the bond, and I didn't wanna, I knew it was gonna be a big ask anyway. And I don't wanna waste the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
I wanna be fiscally prudent, and so that's
Okay,
so we got
so,
to that decision.
okay, so one of your principles is you want to be fiscally prudent,
Right,
right? Ooh, how do you spell this?
ALEL.
Fiscally prudent. All right, that's your job. That's job number one, right?
Mhm.
Sorry about that. I haven't written on a board in 2 years. Okay, so you want to be fiscally prudent. That doesn't mean that you don't want to spend the extra money, right? So if you just did the upgrades, I'm just throwing this question out, would it allow you to deliver the services that people expect, given what's changed in technology and whatnot in the world over the next 3 years?
Are you talking about the reduced scope?
Yeah, like the B, if you did B, would it,
Yeah, you'd have the one, well, we haven't known, and that is the current facility.
Yeah.
And it would be improving on that at a
okay,
more minor level. So yes, we would still be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve. Probably the one monkey wrench in that would be automated materials handling. Would
Yeah.
be a whole lot.
okay,
But would one of those principles be a timely major decisions?
mhm,
We want to have enough time to evaluate this. So do we really want to spend a lot of money in East Bend and change in 5 years? So we need 5 years, I think, to evaluate. It sounds thereabout, to see, okay, what do we need to do? Is this good enough? Do we need to build another place out further?
it's like around 4 years, you'd probably begin to start talking about it, it sounds like.
Probably
Something
sooner than that.
even sooner, okay. So you're making a decision for people's usage for the next 3 years. You want to be fiscally prudent. You want people to have the services they expect, right? Okay, I'm gonna write that one down. Okay. Patrons have services they expect. Okay. Knowing that you're kind of looking at a 2022 to 2025 kind of time frame. Well, more because you're gonna start making your decisions that.
Right.
Right. Maybe, yeah. Yeah.
Would it be prudent, would it be important to actually have a realtor start looking at land in East Bend, so we have an idea what's available, just to check things out?
You could, I guess the cautions I'd have would be, things change rapidly, so that might be a pointless exercise.
Right.
And the optics on it too, that we're right in the middle of a $195 million bond. And we're immediately going out and buying land for something else.
Right.
But at
And you're-
some
Well,
point,
the other
Some-
thing
I think-
is
yeah.
I think we need a facilities plan to be able to determine what, if we are gonna build a facility,
Mhm.
what size facility would that be? What's needed? And then if, based on what's needed, how much land would you need to locate that? So I mean, looking for land unless you know those things would be pretty tough.
And you also want to analyze the impact of this
Right.
current projects, but somebody else had their hand up.
I would say though, that going out and potentially, or deciding whether we want to look at land or not, it's gonna fall somewhere in that 22 to 25 range, or closer probably to the 25.
Okay.
We have to see what this
Make a timeline.
central library is
Yeah.
gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In.
Question, looking ahead, if we were to decide that East Bend would benefit by having a permanent library, where would the funding, how would we, is that another bond? Or how,
That's a great question. You'd have to fund it somehow. And that would either be a bond or a full faith and credit bond, which is basically a loan.
What
That
about
was,
just land? What if we just bought land at that point and then went for a bond to build?
you could do that. You have money in your reserve to do that, unless the land prices jump significantly, but, and you could also plan that in over time. So yes, so you could do that. Yeah, and kind of, I would assume, let's say we're in 2025 and we're saying that's kind of, I would say it'd be very early in 2025 to say, yeah, we actually decided we're gonna build 3 more buildings. But it wouldn't, I don't think it'd be out of the question to say, probably in the next 15 to 20 years, this library is going to need to consider building 1, 2, 3 buildings. And we can make some investments for the future and buy land while it doesn't cost 50 times as much. And you have a placeholder, and then that board in 15 or 20 years has some more options where they can look and say, you know what, times change, everybody is using hovercrafts, we don't need it. We can sell the land, or no, this just grew to 500,000 people in Central Oregon, and thank God we invested in the land.
Similar to what school districts do. right?
Yes,
They
it's
like-
identical, it's
Yeah.
identical.
They usually make
Yeah.
money on.
So the questions you're asking, I'm so happy you're having a discussion, because you are really, you're doing exactly what you should be doing, is you're trying to kind of look way out and still be prudent with your current decision that you have before you, and there are unknowns. But you're gonna be starting pretty quick, once you get through this building, to have those future discussions.
And I'll just point out really quickly is, all of this stuff in some normal community, I wouldn't be saying any of this, but this is a community that is growing by 6,000 people a year. And so the turnaround time from planning for something and then planning again is just speed it up. Normally, if this is a community that's growing at 1% a year, we would probably finish these projects and not do
Take
any
a breath.
planning for
Take
another
a
10
breath.
or 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're not gonna be able to do that. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Do we know what Bend City's projection is for growth in the East Bend area?
Or the north.
What are they saying?
Well, it depends on where they, right now, they're bounded by the urban growth boundary.
Right.
So what we don't know is what's the next phase of their expansion.
Okay,
Where are they going to expand?
for the city limits.
And I don't know, they should be starting that process soon.
So that should most definitely be part of our decision making too.
Yeah.
For the future, for the future now,
Yeah.
yeah. So your principles so far, you said, we want to be fiscally prudent. Well, and we want to make a timely decision. And we want to have services, the patrons to have the services they expect. So I'm going to go back to where Ann started us with, on the other hand, you're looking out about 3-4 years by the time, maybe more, you're going to start talking about it pretty quick, like you are right now, as you should. So,
Well, to Cynthia's question though, we do have an indication of where the present city council, everything are planning to grow. Okay, so, but we know the city council changes. But right now,
yeah,
they're looking at, because of the land, LCDC, remanding the last urban growth boundary plan. They're saying there's land inside the city limits that have to be built to higher density before we'll allow you to go out any further. That's why it's all back.
Yeah.
But then if you look to see what's happening, it's gonna be downtown core, 3rd Street, 3rd, 4th, that whole area, and it's a long off strip of its own. That's gonna be built. The south and east side are gonna be built. They're already scheduled for that. Several thousand houses going here already. And then after they do the property on 27th Street, the DSF, the state land use, state land,
Stevens Road.
Stevens Road, correct? That's east of the section that's already in the UGB. So they can fill going all the way from 27th Street out to the present one. So that's a ton of property there. So they could probably manage that for the next 5-year urban growth plan. After that, they cannot go west. The fire, that's right into the wildlands urban.
And the
That's
Forest
Forest
Service.
Service, that's fire area, right?
Yeah.
Going north is problematic because of the highways. Going further south is problematic because it's just forest. So the only places you're left are east, northeast, east, and southeast, which is where it's going now. And that's where the state remanded them and said, you can't do that. So the plan originally was, let's go there. I think as soon as they do the infill and all these other growths on the southeast end, it's the only place they can go and hope to get past the state. I think. The other thing is all those farmers on that side were petitioning the city to bring them into the urban growth boundary. There's very little money being made on farming on the east side. So the choices are either go into the city, subdivide, make a ton of money. Or the other thing they're thinking of is solar farms. They're leasing out their ranches, their farms for solar farms, which make a lot of money and it's also good for the economy, also good for the environment. So we can see those things coming. It's only a matter of city council wants to do it or they want more housing.
And
Well,
going north though, I mean, I can see a time where you wouldn't know where you left Ben and got into Tumblr. It's all.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and I just walked in that area on
Yes.
Saturday, and there's a ton of residential being put in back there.
The trouble with Tumalo is they're out of water.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask, speaking of water, if anybody would like to take a little, like a 5-minute, 7-minute bio break.
Yes.
And then we'll come back and I'm going to call, I'm gonna kind of do a poll and just see, because you do have an action today to make a decision. Where do you land on this question? And I know it's tempting to say, but this is the decision in front of you, so. Take a break, 7 minutes, and come on back and we'll kind of go around, see what your thinking is, and then we'll call the question. Good discussion, though.
That's a good question, so, yeah. Where are we gonna go? But that's the same thing we faced in 08. I think we know where it's gonna go, where growth is. But what if we're wrong?
I'm gonna put my timer on. Are we still on?
That's not being fiscally,
Okay.
but looking back on it, if we bought the land then, we'd be looking like financial wizards.
I thought as long as she was
Yeah,
reading. it's
yeah.
all good.
Yeah.
And my two little guys are just,
All right, so we're gonna start in a minute. Did you start again?
Yes.
Oh,
it's so much fun.
We're on mute.
It's, and there's so much cool children's
recorded.
Oh, I
literature
yeah.
out of it, it's so funny.
Yeah.
All right, we're still
So
not everybody
cool.
back, so
Yeah.
that's
I want to know
exciting.
whose idea it was this.
Yeah.
It was
Did
my
that.
idea because it was right here.
And
It's
it's
all
starving.
Lynn?
That's unfair.
The thing is, I always say, oh, I'm gonna bring it for Kenny or something, and then it never gets it. You know, it's like, I'm a total liar. Like, oh, I'll bring this to.
Yeah, right, it's like the lies we tell
Yeah,
ourselves,
right. Yeah. Well, we're gonna head to our cabin after. I haven't been there in a million years, so. On the Metolius. On the Metolius. Yeah.
Oh, you know, I love, that's just.
Isn't
one of my most favorite.
It's so beautiful there. Yeah.
Walking there is.
Yeah, it's
We
a
live in
special,
Sisters, so it's quick.
oh, yeah, yeah. It's a really special place. Where would you go for lunch in Sisters?
In Sisters.
Easy, casual, like.
Like barbecue.
Okay, and then if we have any time left, we'll kind of, you could, yeah, I think, yeah, and then we're gonna,
That way.
we've already been talking about the role of the board in building. I think you've been actually living it as you've done this conversation, really excellent
And the
conversation.
decision though is this.
That's your decision,
It actually
Or-
is, it's kind of, how much money do you want to spend?
right?
And because the designers can design
Yeah.
to that.
Okay,
Um,
okay. But we know that 852 will buy kind of the upgrades, et cetera, and the,
you got fresh paint, you get
okay,
probably some technology
Yeah.
upgrades and,
Yeah.
and he included updating all the furnishings, which at that point we probably would not do that.
What kind of technology upgrades?
We could upgrade, mainly the self-check kiosks, security gates. Possibly put in the chutes that we need that would help check in.
Let me take that off.
Sorry,
So we would need, we could upgrade self-check kiosks. There's a new models.
You're saying with the 800,
With this,
right?
yeah, he asked what technology we could do.
Right,
So it would be our self-check kiosks, it could be security gates. It could be the what they're called 24/7 shoots or the book drops. The book drops that we have currently are just your basic book drops. You just throw them in, staff have to check them out or check them in. We could upgrade our book drops so that they're actually checked in as soon as they're dropped in by the customer, which is advantageous for the customer because then they know things have been returned. And especially when if they hit their, I've checked out 50 items limit, it already is checked in for them, so we don't have to, there's no lag time for the customer. So those are the kind of very simple technology upgrades that we would probably do.
Also, we could upgrade our meeting rooms to
Yes.
basically,
on this 852,
For technology.
yeah, for technology.
for technology,
Yeah,
okay,
meeting room upgrade,
right.
something like this.
So we're talking about like screens
Yeah,
for hybrid meetings and stuff like that.
So and so it could be between those items, but kind of what you're thinking about for the 852 is technology upgrades throughout, and what are the other major things that would be accomplished with the 852?
The same furniture.
you could refresh your furniture, you
Right.
could do simple painting.
Mhm.
Would technology be like smart screens like these or
Just for the meeting room. Yeah.
Okay. So it would be a more pleasant place to be, but you wouldn't be changing the configuration of the space is what.
Yeah.
On that price.
Yeah.
If you went to 2.3, you would be,
And then one challenge we do have is the staffing space is a challenge there.
okay,
So that would be. an
The owl
impact.
cameras on.
okay.
what's
So,
the challenge of it?
So if you look, the challenge with the staffing space is when it was designed kind of in the elbow of the building. So it creates a pinch point for the public and for the staff.
mhm.
And the 852 would not really cover trying to
So the 2.3, you'd be able to improve the staff area, right?
improve the staff area.
Okay,
And how it's, it would be a little bit more efficient. And the public then would also not get that pinch point. If you look right where it says
Okay.
number 4,
uh-huh,
you imagine coming in, one of the things we've noticed over time with our East Bend space is people come in that door, the front door, if you will, from the parking lot,
Which floor are you talking about?
on the old design.
Oh, sorry, this one?
Right.
Yeah, they come in the front door, which is number 2, and then they stop.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's a
And
bottleneck,
you get like 5 people there stopping and you're already too many people.
Right.
So that's, that design, we created a pinch point when it was originally designed. The other one takes away that pinch point. It brings people into the building. And I think when Miller Hall was presenting this at one time, they were also saying, it brings people more further into the building. That's really what would make, I think, East Bend more useful, more user-friendly.
mhm.
But, again, if you don't want to
So,
do that.
yeah, it's like-
We
Well,
we would look at other things.
And this is
yeah.
not an either, I would say it's not an either or in the sense that, let's say you wanted something in between.
Mhm.
Where, you know what, I'd like it to be more up to date, I'd like it to be more efficient, I don't want to spend $2.3 million and change everything, but we want to make the staffing area a little more efficient, we want to take care of some of that bottleneck issue. Designers can go and they're
Right.
creative, they can come and say, well, here, we've got some solutions for you, and it's not
Can
gonna be
scale
as
it back.
broken
Okay.
more as this.
So you want some, but they need direction.
Right.
Yeah, so I added that because we've talked about the time frame. So you're talking about people's experience over the next 3-4-ish years, fiscally prudent, but balancing with.
And I would actually say, and this is, I'm just throwing this out.
Yeah.
In my mind, it would be their experience for the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, just,
Okay.
just to say, because one, we don't have to do 5-year leases every time.
Mhm.
But it just seems logical that that's a good time.
So that's a long time, and you said you wanted up to date and efficient.
And so that probably should be part of their thinking too, is if it's for 2 years, well, that's $1 million a year. If it's for 7 years, then it's a different math.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about things like relocating, well, I'm not sure that, but like redoing bathrooms and stuff like that is expensive.
Right,
Bathrooms, yes.
And so are there other things you can do short of that?
right.
And so the direction would be to have them come back with something.
Sure.
Okay, I just want to clear.
Okay, yeah.
I will say, the very first time I ever went to East Bend, you can't put a hold on a new release. And I wanted the book, and the only place that was available was East Bend. And I went in, and it is awkward when you first go in there.
Okay.
So I think the idea of making that change makes a lot of sense to me, because I experienced that.
I did the same thing. I walked in there and stopped.
Right. So we're really not looking at A and B. You're looking at something that,
Experience.
right, okay. So are you ready to, let me just kind of have you go around and say kind of where I'm thinking right now. You might be in consensus, you know? So who's anybody, you know, go ahead and start.
Okay, so what it makes, I don't think it's prudent to spend 2.3 million. I mean, on a leased facility, but I want to do what we can to enhance the public's experience there and increase efficiency. So all the things that are included in B, yes, of course. I'm also, and relocating the staff area, if they can do that, so something in between the two, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And given the volume of pickups and drop-offs there, and we know that's the primary activity, what would the costs be to do more automated materials handling there? I mean, so if they're gonna reconfigure the staff area, what would that, I guess I'd like options, what would those price tags be? Because, I mean, it seems like that would really improve the efficiency and save lots of money down the road on staff time and all that.
Okay.
So that's one area.
Okay. So you're not like, you don't want to go like bare bones. You're.
No,
like-
if there's stuff that we can do
Okay.
for that will affect the next 5 to 7 years and make things better for the operation of that branch, I think that makes sense, but I don't want to do things like bathroom relocations that
Gotcha.
would be expensive
Okay.
and would just
Okay.
pour money
All right.
into building.
I'm gonna go around. Anne.
Yes, I do think that will be in this facility, as Todd said, probably 5 to 7 or maybe even longer. Just based on how things work as far as purchasing land and building. So I feel that we need to put some investment into this. And I kind of agree with Ann, we don't need to go full hog, relocate bathrooms, but if we can improve the efficiency of that, both for our public and for the staff. I know it's a pickup and drop off, but we're also seeing that the meeting rooms and story times are being held. So I think we need to look at that to make sure that there's room for those activities to take place. So I think there again, we're kind of in between, but I think if we had some options to go back and look at, you know, to kind of address those issues, so that it can serve the public for, you know, years to come.
Good. Okay. Cynthia.
So did you address, Todd, what the cost, the 1.6, what the hard, what their, how the architects came up with that?
Yeah, that is, you are doing some demolition here, taking out the staff area, adding walls for the staff area, new staff area. And then putting in some walls for meeting spaces
Okay.
here. I believe the bathrooms are all where they are, so
Okay.
that actually didn't come into it.
Okay, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
back here,
No, but
like
it's
the
a
storms are-
good comment to have because they like to move back.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know, they had an earlier version where they were moving them all over the place.
I think that's.
So those are two big ones,
Okay.
is really some construction in these two areas.
Is there a lot of call at East Bend for these smaller meeting areas, do you know? I know it's so hard to do anything
Project.
with COVID right now, but pre-COVID, was there?
We have had a call in general across the county for small meeting spaces. So that's a desire that we've been trying to achieve in all of our.
Well, to Ann's comments earlier about the cost of
Oh, yeah.
people
just-
meeting their kids,
Or
or
just
just parents
tutoring.
meeting their kids.
Yeah.
Or people using the computers.
And that doesn't, and again, that didn't rule it out. There could be some, like, again, like they could come in and say, well, we can, based on what you're saying, we think we've got a solution to this bottleneck and we can create a small meeting space for you or
Okay.
something.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So Cynthia?
Well, I mean, those changes, I think, make sense. And if there's something that's going to be usable to the people in East Bend, I agree with what the two Ann's said. No, two of you. If they can keep the cost down rather than not spending the 2.3 million, that's fine, but I do think the change of the staffing area and the meeting areas, I think that's important. I think that sends an important
Yeah.
message to the people in that part of the
Yeah.
community.
And as you say, if you amortize it over
Yes,
a long period of time, in the meantime, people are
you need to,
using.
we need to respond to
Yeah.
what they need.
So what I'm hearing you say is if it could be a little bit less than 2.3 gig, but
Yes.
you really want these outcomes
Yes.
for
I do.
patrons, okay? Right?
Yeah, I agree with those. I've got this research background,
Mhm.
so I like to experiment. But of course, you have to realize that my technicians always kick me out of the lab because they said I couldn't run it.
Mhm.
I can set things up, but I shouldn't be right on the subject. I think this would be a good opportunity. If Lynn is saying, interesting, drop off, pick up, meeting rooms. People don't go into the browse, but they don't seem to be complaining that they have no browsing. They browse elsewhere or else they browse on the internet, which is what all my wife's cookies. This may be the future that's coming. Right? Pandemic showing us people will tolerate it, actually like it. I'm thinking what we need to do is tell the architects, what is it we want to have? You redesign this thing with several options,
Mhm.
right? I like Dan's idea of saying, well, if you want this is what it'll cost you. If you want that, also this is what you. You know, I like the menu idea. So that first of all, so what do we want in this thing? I'd like to see what happens if we should have more meeting space. Well, flexible meeting space again.
Okay.
Larger space that can be broken down or smaller spaces to be opened up. For story time and for meetings. I know a lot of people want to have meetings.
Okay.
So meetings are really good. Having a good area for staff to work in,
Mhm.
efficient, comfortable. I mean, they're gonna spend hours there.
Yeah.
Maybe we should look at less shelf space. I mean, even less browsing space. See what happens, and if people complain, or if there's more usage even. Meeting rooms, higher priority. Meeting room, story time room, higher priority than shelf space, shelf flooring. And staff having comfortable space. I think those are important to me. The one thing there that I don't think they can do anything about but if they could, it'd be great, is parking.
Yeah, yeah,
The parking in the
Yeah.
front is just terrible.
Yeah.
The parking back is nice.
kind of what you have control over here, right? Yeah.
Well,
Right.
the release
Yeah.
spot somewhere
Yeah.
across the street, I mean, Dutch Brothers is there, maybe they don't want to keep their space anymore. It's a drive-through, but I don't know.
Maybe we can make them a Dutch Bros kiosk
Yeah.
and drive-through.
Little
Get your
kiosk.
booking, you're
Yeah.
booking your brew,
Yeah.
right?
That's not bad.
Yeah, just kidding. Okay,
No,
so
parking.
you've all talked about moving the staff area, more efficient drop off stuff, and you're gonna evaluate how your new central systems are gonna work. And updating rooms for the flexible spaces
A
and
lot of
how
flexibility.
much that would cost if they can bring that in under the 2.3.
Yeah.
But,
The last thing I would have
oh,
is
sorry,
make sure that the facility can be used way after hours, even when the library is closed.
okay, so
Right.
So
accessibility,
they have to make
okay,
accessibility after
Yeah.
hours,
okay,
and on Sundays even.
We have that already.
It is
so,
current.
okay,
On
Yeah.
Sundays, you can.
Yeah.
yeah, good.
Whatever.
So maintain that
Maintain
accessibility.
that.
Good, good.
I kind of like the 1.6 that you were talking about, the changes sounded like, yeah, that's really what
Okay.
is needed. I don't want to give the Miller Hall a task to come back with a bunch of options that costs money for them to do it. So I would say, again, give them these requisites.
Yes,
And say, come up with one or two
Right.
options. Don't
Good.
spend
Yeah,
a
because
lot.
we've
Yeah.
got one option, one option.
Yeah. And you're asking, you know what you want as a group. So you're asking, come back, tell us how we pull this off for under.
I think that as long as we have consensus that we will do some reconstruction and not just the 850 that seems like it's more, let's
Yeah.
spoop it up.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
want to do some
Yeah.
reconstruction.
I mean, it sounds like you're all in agreement on that.
Right.
That you don't want people to have 5 years of this awkward space.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Anybody not in agreement?
Well, let me just clarify what Buddy said.
Yeah.
Would you like them to come back with options for, multiple options for the meeting rooms? Or just like 2 options for everything overall?
Overall.
Overall.
I don't want to go out and say, well, we might want this, we might want this, and they end up with 4. They've spent ended up with 4 proposals. Come back and give us a, 1 or 2 proposals. What the requisites we give you.
I think we ought to get at least 2. Otherwise,
It's
no.
up to Miller Hall to
Yeah.
look at it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left. Do you need to do some kind of official, like,
No,
anything? We're in agreement? Everybody,
Do we have
you
to
got the
vote?
direction you were looking for?
I think I have the direction I need.
Okay.
I put in case you had some solid votes, but I think it's more of a discussion that we have with Miller Hall of, well, let me summarize what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
right.
I think we've heard all the aspects that we would like to see in this, about reaching the meeting space, yes, finding some room for some public meeting, upgrading technology. But we've talked with them about, we want to do more than just take what we have and make it nice. So
Right.
let's talk about what it's going to look like. But we don't want to go all out 2.3 million and just blow up this place. So some of that's going to be some discussion with them. I think that, in other words, the discussion is going to come when they come back with some conceptual designs and say, here's
Yeah.
some of your options, and then you're going to have to make a decision.
Right.
Good, so with the limited time, so this again, these sessions are meant to be giving you time to step back and have, thoughtful dialogue, that you're not crammed with so much agenda items. So I think one of the questions we had is, do you have other topics? And then the other thing I wanted to do was ask you all to think about your governance, you know me, and just reflecting on this meeting. I could give you a grade on this meeting, but I don't want to talk first. Kind of how do you think the discussion went in the last hour and bit about kind of your governance and the way you approach this. Kind of what went well, what would you change, how did it fit, how you see your governance? So maybe just take a few minutes to evaluate and then see are there other topics bubbling up, because we have about 10 minutes left. So go for it.
Well, personally, for me, once we got down to talking about facts, talking about things that are measurable, things that we can see and understand. For me, I felt like it started moving forward. I know that I, at one point, and I'm sorry, Ray, I got a little bit emotional, and I think to get away from that, because this doesn't have anything to do with my feelings or what I want or what I think. I'm here to be a representative for this county. And so for me to get away from that emotional aspect, I need to deal with what's something I can see and measure. And so once we started discussing that, that helped me move forward.
Others? I'm just thinking about your governance and your model and.
I think it does help to discuss, to get other opinions. Anne had some assessments that made me think, oh, okay, yeah. And now I know, you know, where she's coming from. And I think that helps us all move slowly in one direction, which is where we need to be moving, in one direction. And the more we talk to each other and agree on the direction, I think we're better off. And if that's called governance, then that's good. I like that word better.
Yeah, good. Okay. Others? Yeah, Anne.
Well, as the newest member of the board, I found this very helpful because just coming into our board meetings, it does move quickly and we don't have the opportunity just to throw a topic out and talk about it. And for us to work as one group, I think we need to get a feel for who we are and how we think and how we make decisions. So I found this session to be extremely helpful, that we could just have an open discussion on topics. And I met with Ann and Todd earlier and said that I would find work sessions to be extremely helpful moving forward, because we do have a lot on our upcoming agendas, and our board meetings are not the place to really have those kind of open, frank discussions. So I look forward to continuing with our quarterly work sessions.
Right, I'll let Anne go last because she's the chair, maybe. Or you, I don't know why I did that. I don't know how you did it.
She's leaving.
Oh,
Oh,
seriously.
Now you have to go first.
There you go.
Ray, what are your thoughts? Yeah.
She's younger.
Now you still have to go.
We're all, yeah, what are your thoughts?
I always like to speak last, give everybody else a chance.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Good. What are your thoughts? Yeah.
I think part of this has been, we have not had work sessions in person for 2 years. And that plus the fact that we've had new board members in that period has precluded us being able to really do what we've done in the past, which is these work sessions where we hear each other's opinions. We don't necessarily reach a decision, like we don't go here and we pass a motion. Usually not. We come to a decision and say, what do we need to have to move forward? And then we go into our public sessions where we actually make motions, make final decisions so the public can be there and hear us if they want to. This type of work session has been the most valuable in the past to make the board more cohesive. I think going forward now, unless the governor tells us and health authority or CDC says, everybody back home again, the next variant's out, I think we'll be much better served by doing this. I would even like to see, instead of quarterly, we could do it more frequently because we have a lot of issues coming up before us, like the architects are gonna come back. I think we need to discuss this again in a work session, not at a board meeting. So if they come back in a month or two, we should discuss it at that point. Rather than have it say we have to wait. I think the more times we meet as a whole to discuss and to give opinions, not necessarily a consensus, but know what we're thinking, so that Todd can have some sort of direction. That would be much better for us.
And you don't always have to reach consensus, but
No.
once you decide, you speak with one voice. And final thing, it's almost.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everybody said. I think these in-person sessions are really helpful. And having the space to really throw ideas out there and, explore them, I think is like the work that we should be doing. For sure. And, in the past, a monthly meeting was probably enough to, it was enough to take care of the business that we had before us, but right now, there are a lot of critical decisions being made. And so I think we do need more frequent discussions as things come up and to be able to have the space to ask questions of the architects and, really carefully consider where we're going with all of this. And I guess the one thing that I would say is back to what Cynthia was talking about. I think, dealing with facts and dealing with where we're going. This is a huge undertaking that has a lot of moving parts and it's expensive and we want to do a really good job. And so I don't want to spend, I want to honor the decisions of where we are right now, where the decisions that have been made in the past and not continue to revisit those because I think they take up our bandwidth and we need to be looking forward, not backwards. And so there's a lot of decisions that have been made to get us to this point, and I think it's important to remember that and to continue to focus on moving forward.
And I think my 2 cents, 1 minute to noon, is that you really did an excellent job of thinking about what making some assumptions, but really zeroing in on what was really important to you, looking out, but being able to kind of make some prudent decisions. I give you an A+. You did a great job today. Well done.
I will say logistically, Lori's been trying to schedule the next work session, and right now it's kind of pushed back to the end of July because that's the first time that all 5 of you can get in the room together. So if one thing we may want to think about, and you'll probably all throw something at me, is we're having trouble scheduling it, that we may want to think about, you do something like have a work session in the morning of a board meeting, and then you have a board meeting. It's gonna make for a really long day, but
Well, Cynthia thought we were going to 3 today, so hey.
Yeah, there you go.
that's just a thought to throw out there because it's just it's been difficult to find times to do it.
Well, that's what city council does, so.
Yeah.
That might be the very best solution,
I think so.
because I kind of plan my other stuff around the board meetings and.
Especially when they're in person, because like you're coming, I'm coming, you're coming from a longer distance. I just as soon make it a day.
Right.
Than
Right.
make 2 trips.
Good point. All right, so they'll work on that. All right, do you have to officially?
Oh, okay, well, I'll adjourn, is there a clock?
Right.
Oh,
it's
I was
behind
kidding.
there.
I was gonna say, what clock are you looking
It's
at?
11.
I'll adjourn, thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for your insight. What would we do without you are not allowed to retire?